Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Wednesday morning, August the 10th. I'm glad to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and chat room's open. I did pop the link into there, what we're talking about. That's Robert Burney's webpage is From Joy to Me and You, and that's www.joy, J-O-Y, the number 2, M-E-U.com. And Robert Burney, he's a codependence counselor. He's a codependence therapist. He's a grief counselor. He's an author, and he's a spiritual teacher. He's written a book called Codependence: The Dance of Wounded Souls, which is an awesome book. And his web pages are quite, extensive. Like when you go to his site index, you can see he's got a lot of information there about codependence, inner child work, which is what I'm working on and what I'm kind of working through here, and also stuff like relationship and spirituality and relationship and whatnot. So he's got a lot of great information there. I hope everybody will go check it out. So thanks everybody for being here. I appreciate it. I'm not a counselor or therapist, just a private citizen paying to do my shows here on Blog Talk Radio, and you have to listen at your own discretion. I'm talking about abuse, and abuse is a sensitive subject, and it's, it can bother people. It can trigger survivors. If you're just starting your healing journey, you want to be careful listening to my stuff and anything like this. You know what I mean? Like, be careful what you're listening to, and just know what's good for you to listen to and what's not. You need to make that decision for yourself. And so I ask everybody to listen at your own discretion. And young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my shows. And that's just because there's a lot of adult content on my shows. And I think children should be protected at all times, and it is your right to be protected. And so if you're under the age of 18, don't listen to my shows without having an adult, someone who's older who can help you make a decision. Your parents, hopefully you got someone in your life, counselor, school counselor or a coach or someone who can listen to the show and then, see if it's something that you should be listening to age appropriately, right? Because I don't know how young the people are who are listening to my shows. So anybody under the age of 18, I just ask that you get permission, before you listen to my shows, right? Thanks very much for being here, everybody. I appreciate it. We'll get right into this. This is looking at the recovery process, inner child work. Really, this is the I think the third article on this recovery for the inner child work that Robert Burney wrote, and it's the section dealing with fear, emotional balance and fear and whatnot. And he's got all kinds of great stuff here. And this particular information is really helpful for me because I'm looking at my inner child, and I'm actually working through inner child work right now. And so this is really good information for me, so I'm hoping that other people will get something out of this too. But I'm enjoying what Robert Burney has to say. I like what he has to say about this stuff, and it's a little bit different than some of the stuff I've seen out there, about the shame, rage connection, codependence, inner child work. He's really quite spiritual, obviously, and what he's talking about really as a whole, that, society really is codependent, and society really is has some really messed up belief systems, and that's very, very true. So it's called Emotional Balance Through the Fear by Robert Burney. And so yesterday we just sort of left off. He was saying that on a very core level, codependence is about buying into the belief that we are trapped in relationships, and being abused by a parent, in jobs, in a geographic area, in having someone else's belief system define us, etc. Feeling trapped is a function of believing that we do not have any choices, and that is never the truth, he says. We always have a choice, as I talk about on my page about empowerment and victimization. And so, that's very true. Like, that's what we were talking about yesterday. I mean, children who are being abused, obviously they're stuck in a situation unless somebody gets them some help, which doesn't always happen. And, we basically learn how to cope with that situation by taking on some behaviors that at the time probably help to save our lives or save our sanity, but then as adults are very unhealthy behaviors, you know what I mean? And so I'm looking at changing, a lot of the behaviors that I had that were very much self-sabotaging and very much not helping me out, unhealthy belief systems, unhealthy behaviors, right? So that's what I'm working on and have been really for, over 4 years now. So it's a lot of work because some of the stuff I don't recognize. I don't recognize that I'm doing, or I don't see it, and sometimes someone else has to point it out to me, like, oh, well, look what you're doing. You're self-sabotaging, or whatever in something that I'm doing, behavior that I've taken on, and it's really a lot of it was to protect myself. And I think that that's the case. Many times we pick up these behaviors as children, especially survivors of child abuse and whatnot, because we're just trying to protect ourselves, and so we develop these behaviors that later on are really quite, detrimental, to our adult lives, right? And so it's important to see if we can change some of the stuff. I know that I'm working on it kind of all the time, and noticed and recognized quite a bit. But I probably still have things that I do that I don't recognize, right? So that's the thing. And he says the most insidious and powerful level of victimization that codependents have to overcome in recovery is the level of feeling victimized by ourselves, by who we think we are, our false image of ourselves. So he says we have a core relationship with ourselves in which we feel that there is something inherently wrong with our being, that we are unlovable, unworthy, somehow shameful. And because of that, we learn to try to do things right in order to overcome the defective self and earn the love of others, or we went to the other extreme and tried to convince ourselves that we didn't need others. So these are two extremes of the disease of codependency: classic codependent behavior and counter-dependent behavior. So it's really quite interesting. And I know for myself, when I was a kid, I was really trying to gain my mother's love because my mother rejected me at birth. I was born out of rape and from her husband, my dad, marital rape, and she was miserable. I was the last child born, and she had lost two before me, who were stillborn, and so he was continuing to rape her and just, because he wanted to get his needs met and didn't care if she died in the process. She wasn't supposed to have any children after she had her fifth child, and then she ended up having 5 more. There would have been quite a few of us had these babies lived, but there was quite a few stillborn babies in there, and plus one of my brothers made it and one of my sisters made it. But I was just rejected really from her. She didn't have any more capability to love any more children. Like she didn't love the ones that she had already, and then when I came along, by the time I came along, their marriage was in such a shamble really, and the abuse in the home between my parents and my siblings, who were quite a bit older than me, some of them, and between each other, my parents abusing each other. She didn't have any. There was no space for a small baby. It was like, okay, she had no energy to love me or nurture me or care for me. Right? It was just another baby. I was just another child and born out of rape. So I was completely rejected as a child, and it's pretty harsh. And I believe that when I was a kid, I used to try to gain her love. Like I really wanted her to love me, and I would I would be nice to her, and I would want to hug her. She would push me away, and push me literally down. Like she'd be, get away from me, don't touch me, don't. She was just always rejecting me. And then when I got older, she became really quite violent about things, and really was just going to show me how much she didn't want me in her life, and how much she didn't appreciate the fact that I actually lived. And didn't die with the other stillborn babies, right? This was a huge psychological issue that she put me through, because she would tell me that stuff. She'd be like, "You should have died with those other stillborn babies, and you didn't deserve to live, and look at you, you're just a rotten kid." And she just hurt my core being, like who I was. You know what I mean? I probably need some extensive, therapy really. But the thing is, on one level, I do pretty good. Like on one level, and that's just my fight to stay alive. Really, it's my fight to say, you know what, I did not deserve that, because I know that I didn't. Like I'm very smart. And the thing is I know I didn't deserve that, right? But on one hand, I still see myself, I guess, my self-image, which is just this false self-image of myself as being just this unlovable creature, you know what I mean? Even though I know that that's not true. Other people don't see me like that. I don't feel that other people see me that way, right? It's my own vision of myself my parents gave me. So I was talking about that a little bit like yesterday. And then after I couldn't gain her love by doing whatever I could to try to gain her love and care, I got a little bit older and actually started to work the opposite way and say, I don't need you. I don't need your love anyway. I don't need you guys. So because the other thing wasn't working, right? Trying to gain their love and care, and both my parents, trying to get them to actually do what I needed them to do for me, which was to be my parents. and care about me and love me and try to do the right thing by me, which neither of them could. But they just didn't want to, or whatever. They couldn't and they didn't want to. It's a double thing, right? It's not that they just couldn't or that they just didn't want to. They couldn't and they didn't want to. So it was a double whammy, right? And so, I actually went the other way and said, I don't need you guys. So by the time I was like 13, I was just, by the time I was 10, I was like, just go ahead and kill me. I don't care. What are you going to do? Like, you already killed me inside anyway. You killed my spirit. You killed my whole soul. You're physically killing me. Why don't you just kill me? Go ahead. You know what I mean? I wanted out by the time I was 10 years old, and really most of that stemmed from the rejection from my parents. Some of it had to do with the CSA incest from my brother, but most of it was this rejection from my mother, because my mother had, completely rejected me out of her life and was totally mistreating me, and I wanted her love. I wanted her care. I guess I was just asking for a little bit too much from somebody who was never going to be able to do it. But as a child, how are you supposed to cope with that? You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't receiving any care or love from anybody else in the home. I was like, come on, you're my mother, man. You have to do this for me, Like, I was in her face, and I think that's why I caught a lot of beatings, and I was always in trouble, because I was in her face really saying what I needed. I was like, I was trying to actually make them accountable. It's what I did all my life, and actually caught me a lot of beatings, right? Because I was in their face, and social services was in their face too, but they didn't care. And they were, really just two very ignorant and violent and horrific evil people, right? Twisted evil people. But, I guess that's exactly what he's saying here. He says we learn to try to do right, in order to overcome our defective self and earn the love of others. So I was learning how to I was trying to do everything right for my mother when I was little, like really little, going out and picking her flowers and, writing little poems and stuff to her and, Mommy, I love you and all this stuff, right? Then because I wasn't getting what I needed, I went the other way. And that was to say that, to convince myself that I didn't need them anyway. And really what that was just my own, my own way of coping to say, so that I wouldn't get hurt again in the process of saying, oh, my God, I'm completely rejected. I rejected them, and that way I could say, haha, I'm the one who's rejecting them now. And what it did, I guess, as a child, it just allowed me to have some control back in my court, in my ball court, to say, look, I don't need you people anyway. But it did bring on a lot of hatred, a lot of rage, and a lot of anger, because I didn't get what I needed, never did get what I needed. And then, my mother passed away when I was 30, right around 30 years old, and I was just like, oh my God, I am never, ever, ever going to get what I needed from her. But I guess I knew that all along. It's not that I didn't know that as an adult. I guess somewhere back inside of me, that little inner child was really hoping that my mother would apologize for what she had done to me as a child, and that my mother would take responsibility for what she had done. Really, mainly it was all about my mom's abuse, because my dad, I didn't really care about him. He's just an evil man, and very sick and mentally ill, and he hurt his family, he hurt his wife, and I didn't really have any kind of love in my heart for him. But my mother, I really loved her, and so it really hurt to be completely rejected by her. And so then I took on that whole counter-dependent behavior of saying, I don't need you, I don't need anybody, right? And that's how I carried on my life until, I got older, quite a bit older. And I'm still kind of even like that now. You know what I mean? Like, it's easy for me to revert back to that behavior of I don't need anybody, I don't, who needs anybody? I'll deal with this myself. I'll just live my life, and I think that's just from being rejected all the time, for so long, right? It's a horrible feeling, and we do need people, and we do need other people, but we need healthy people, good people, kind people in our lives, people who are going to treat us right. And so that's what I decided. I set my boundaries, and I said, nobody's crossing these boundaries. I don't care who they are. Nobody has the right to abuse anybody, and nobody is sure ever going to abuse me again. You know what I mean? Because I'm putting my foot down, and I've got my boundaries so clear cut that I quit jobs if I'm not treated properly. And people would say, well, you have to be able to take some abuse. I've heard counselors say this, therapists and stuff will say, well, it's just part of life. You have to be able to take some abuse. And I'm like, really, do I? Are you saying that I need to go ahead and be re-victimized because society is screwed up? I don't think so. So basically, it's ridiculous that anybody would even think that that's okay. But people, even like therapists and counselors, are so twisted by society's dysfunction that they buy into it too, that it's okay that people would abuse people. No, it's not. And so, I mean, it's either, for me, truth is truth, right? And abuse is abuse. So why am I going to allow somebody to abuse me again when I've already set my boundaries? I mean, it's like I don't care who they are, a boss, a coworker, someone in my family still living, which is very few and far between. They're almost all dead now. But the ones that are still here are completely out of my life, you know what I mean? And I'm happy. Thank God. For the first time, I'm like, yes, this is my life. I'm living it according to the way that I want to. And I choose to have nobody have that kind of control and that kind of power over me again, where they can hurt me and think that they can get away with it with no apologies, no trying to correct the behavior, no, I mean, I'll give people a chance, right? But I don't get what I need from that, and I don't get an apology, and I don't get a correction of behavior, then they're out of my life. You know what I mean? Because it's like, no, you're not going to put your crap on me. I've already had enough. I'm not taking it anymore, right? I'd rather be by myself than to have to deal with more abuse. So, see, part of me is still kind of that counter-dependent behavior, but yet I'm willing to try, and I'm willing to, even to be a little forgiving and say, okay, well, I want an apology. But if I don't get an apology and somebody sits there and says to me, no, it's perfectly fine that I hurt your feelings and you just deal with it, then they're out of my life, right? And really fast, because I have no problems cutting people off. You know what I mean? Like, it's easy. It's harder for me to allow people to stay in my life than it is for me to cut people off. I can easily cut people off, right? So I mean, it's like, I'm working on trying to be forgiving and to be, to cut some slack and say, okay, well, people do make mistakes. That's fine, because I make mistakes. I would like to be given a second chance too. But if you don't see a correction in behavior, and that's just going to continue on, then what you have is someone who's going to try to control you, someone who's going to try to put their garbage on you. And I already had that from my parents. I'm not taking that from an adult dysfunctional society out here. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't think so. So I have, some issues that, they don't coincide with what society says is okay. That it's all right that we go ahead and treat each other like crap, even if it's coworkers, or bosses or supervisors. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, these people can take their dysfunctional, garbage somewhere else, because I'm not interested in it. And, so that means self-employment, I guess, right? Because I refuse to be mistreated anymore without somebody coming around and saying, look, I was wrong, I owe you an apology, like whatever. Because, hey, I'm like that. If I do something that hurts somebody, like I'm right away trying to make amends for it. Like, oh my God, I'm sorry, and that was wrong. I don't mind owning up to what I do. I don't mind taking responsibility for what I do, and then try to correct it, right? Because I'm into trying to learn, right? I'm into trying to be better. And a lot of these people just think they can go ahead and just do whatever they want. That's what my parents thought. Yeah, they could just go ahead and reject me, beat on me, hurt me, and hurt the rest of the children and each other. And that was just fine. No, it wasn't, And it's ridiculous. It's absolutely horrific that people think this stuff is okay. So I'm that whole counter-dependent thing. I mean, I'm sure that's really was one of my behaviors. Absolutely, it was. Robert Burney says, anytime we say something to the effect of "I can't help it," that is just how I am, or that is the way I've always been, or that is just me, or that type of statement, we are being the victim of the false self-image we built up to protect ourselves. So we are empowering our codependence. So "I can't" is almost never a true statement. The true statement is I choose not to. That's kind of interesting. So in other words, I choose not to change. I choose not to get help, right? I choose not to treat somebody right? Instead of saying, oh, I can't change my behaviors, or, like, that's funny. That's what my sweetheart always tells me, because he's got issues, right? And he'll say stuff like, well, I can't change. I'm just going to be who I am. And it's like, oh, okay. So that means you just choose not to, because I understand how this stuff works. I'm like, you just don't want to change. You can, but you don't want to change some of those behaviors that are negative, and you know what I mean? It's like, well, this is just the way I am. So somewhere he's got a false self-image going on inside of him. Most of people do. And I think, I know for myself, I'm trying to actually get in touch with that and learn how to change that. Because that false self-image, I mean, that self-image that I was given as a child, I mean, that's so, inherently there. Like, that's so from so far back, you know what I mean, that, like, trying to get it's not that I don't see it within me, within my inner child, looking inside of myself, see this little wounded person that I was, and think, oh my God, this little unlovable person, this little creature. My issue is how do I change how I see that little person? You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to have to do it, obviously. The world, I don't even think the world can see, but it's not something I think the world sees me as, this little unlovable creature. It's my own self. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice here. But yeah, like, I see myself that way, and that's, how do I change that? So that's really what I'm searching for, is that answer and that information, right? So hopefully I'll find it here one day, you know what I mean? Because I don't read ahead, I just sort of go with what he's talking about, or what material I'm looking at for the day. I don't really look at it ahead of time. So he says, but we cannot make choices until we realize that we have the right to make choices. And growing up in environments that taught us that life was about right and wrong, was black and white, caused us to be afraid of making choices for fear of doing wrong. So we were powerless to make choices as long as we thought the only choice was between right and wrong. Because as long as we believed that we were in reaction to old, as long as we believed that, we were in reaction to old tapes. So, well, yeah, because, children don't have choices usually when it comes to how they're, when they're being abused. Abused children, whatever, they have to take whatever's coming. It's not like we can even protect ourselves or, make choices as far as choices go, and then when we get older, we almost feel like we don't even have the ability to make those choices or the right to make those choices. I think that can happen for many people, like, for many survivors of abuse, they almost feel powerless in their ability to make decisions, because what if they do it wrong? It's that core image thing, that's that core message of everything I do is wrong. Well, especially if as a child you were told that your whole life, like you're just, everything you do is wrong and you're just bad, and you're whatever the parent or whoever the caregiver was that just drilled this into you, or even a teacher, a coach or somebody who just really drilled this stuff into you and actually made you believe it yourself, which is exactly what happens, right? As long as you didn't believe it, be all right. Like my mother would call me names. Like my mother was famous for calling me like a whore and a slut and all this, and even worse, but I'm not going to go for that on the air. But she was terrible. That's when I was a little kid, and I didn't really know what those words meant, right? And that was after my brother had sexually used me and stuff. And my mother knew my brother was sexually using me, and she did nothing to stop it. She wasn't standing there watching, you know what I mean? But she knew what was going on because I told her, and she didn't even bother to investigate. She says, "Oh well, just wrap yourself up in a blanket like a mummy." And I'm like, oh, thanks for the advice there. I was 8 years old, and like, what could I do, right? I was like, oh, that's great advice. Thanks very much. I was really not pushing it with her because she was always ready to beat on me anyway, and I just caught a beating from her prior to telling her that. So I thought, man, I don't want to push it because she'll beat the shit out of me again. And she loves her sons, which my mother did love her sons a whole lot better than she did her daughters. And so she kind of catered to her sons because my dad was abusing my brothers. So my mother, in order to get back at my dad, sort of really treated her sons a little different than she did her daughters, because my mom wanted to gain the sons' love, and so that they wouldn't love their dad. See, my parents played us against each other all the time because they were evil, twisted people. And so, so my mother just ignored the fact that my brother was raping me and sodomizing me and then sexually using me for a period of time. And so, my God, that's absolutely horrific. You know what I mean? That a child should have to grow up in that. You know what I mean? And that, these names that she would call me. I had no idea what whore and a slut was. You know what I mean? Not at that age. I just knew they were bad words, right? Then I got older and I realized what she was saying to me. You know what I mean? And I didn't buy into that. I knew I wasn't a whore. I was like, okay, just because my own brother just sexually used me does not mean I'm a whore. As soon as I got older, especially about, 2-3 years older, I started to learn what those words were. And I was like, I'm not a whore. I'm not a slut. And my mother continued to call me that all the way through until I was about, in my 20s, right? She was just, she was a horrible, absolutely evil, twisted person, right? And then she could go out to the neighbors and sit there and, and the neighbors just loved her. And, I don't know. It's absolutely horrific that people do this sort of stuff, and it's not like the neighbors didn't know that we were not being treated right. We lived on this one street forever. Social services was involved. The police were always there. These people knew who my parents were, but they knew that they were abusers with a capital A. But the thing is that they didn't care about the kids. We were just these little rotten little kids that just needed our ass kicked, and we just needed to be just put in our place, and we were just these bad rotten kids, right? And my parents were these two people that just everybody just loved. Hey, look, so look at them. They're bringing brownies over. Hey, let's have a game of cards. Let's have a drink. And it's like my parents were like buddies with pretty well everybody on the block, except for the people that could see through it. There were a few families on the block that actually could see through it and didn't welcome them around, and wouldn't even let their kids come over to our place because they were like, no way, bunch of psychotic idiots over there. And so, did anybody really step in on our behalf? No. But social services was involved anyway because my parents were brought on charges. But the thing is, here's my mother calling me these names. I mean, I didn't buy into that. I was like, I'm not a whore. I am not a slut. So once I learned what those words were, then I was like, okay, that's ridiculous because those don't belong to me. You know what I mean? And so I didn't take that on, from her. But she still continued to use those words to hurt me. You know what I mean? So it's absolutely horrific that this stuff, really does. It can affect people, you know what I mean? It's absolutely horrific. They said, Robert Burney says, we grew up in societies that were emotionally dishonest, in societies that taught us to do things right in order to feel valued and loved, in societies that taught us that life was about destinations, that when we got there we would feel fulfilled and happy. So it's not about getting there, he says, not about destination. It's about learning and growing on our journey. It's about making enough progress to have the capacity to enjoy here as much of the time as possible. So balance is a shifting change, constantly fluctuating dance that we are learning to relax into. It cannot be forced. It cannot be restricted by some arbitrary, rigid belief about right and wrong. It's about each of us following our own path, our own truth, in learning to align with the truth that is love. So that's really interesting. And, I think that's true, it's not about the destination. It's about, for me especially, I'm trying to learn how to get comfortable in my own skin. Because I've never been comfortable in my own skin and my own body. I mean, as a child, I hated my body, and I grew up into a preteen, and I hated my body, and then I grew up into an adult, and I hated my body. And even though, for a while there, it wasn't even all that bad looking because I was young and I was in shape, but, it was this poor self-image, very, very poor self-image. And I'm just learning. I'm trying to learn how to relax into my body and actually love myself. You know what I mean? My whole self, my physical self, my spiritual self, right? My whole body, soul, spirit, right? I'm just trying to learn how to relax into that and allow myself to really truly love myself, like all of the parts of myself, and even the wounded parts of myself, right? Because for so long I was very uncomfortable even just in my own skin. Like for me, I can't even get comfortable in my own apartment. Like it's my own apartment. I pay for this sucker, huge money, and it's very expensive up here in Canada. I pay a lot for this little apartment, and up until I'd say about 2 years ago, I couldn't even get comfortable even sitting in a chair in my own apartment, because that's the discomfort that I feel all the time about my being, where I am in this world, this existence. It wouldn't matter what city I'm in. It doesn't matter what town I'm in. It doesn't matter what apartment I'm in. It makes no difference what I'm wearing, or where I'm even sitting, if it's on the floor or a chair. My whole life I've been very much disconnected and uncomfortable with this existence, of just trying to be comfortable in my own skin, in my own world, where, hey, I belong to this, universe as a whole with everybody else here coexisting, And so this is what I'm really working on, is trying to feel a connection and trying to feel, that absolutely I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And that, I do love myself and I do love my body. I love my, my whole being. And that's really what I'm working on. It's a gradual process. It just doesn't happen overnight. I wish that it would, but it's taking time, to go through this stuff. But thanks everybody for being here. I actually have quite a lot of people here today. Thanks very much for tuning in, and I appreciate it. And if you need anything, any information I can get for you, you can leave me a message here, and I'll get back to you. And the recovery process is from Robert Burney, www.joy2meu.com, and that's joy2meu.com. So be sure and check out Robert Burney's web pages. He's got some great stuff there. So I'll be on tonight as the Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is up to us, and then I'll be on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio here as well, on Blog Talk Radio. And then tomorrow morning we'll just pick up where we left off here 6 o'clock a.m., same time, same place, one child abuse survivor to another. So, if you're a survivor and you're having a hard time out there and you're thinking, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to cope, I don't know how I'm going to get through this day, even just today, you make sure you call the crisis line or you phone somebody. Sometimes it's impossible to get a hold of people, or you can't find somebody around who to talk to. I've been in this situation, right? So, you make sure you do the right thing by yourself and you make a phone call to anonymously to a crisis line, whatever you have to do. But you make sure that you stick around and you get some help and you reach out and you don't allow yourself to spiral down and because you certainly deserve so much better. I know that I do. And we need to learn how to treat ourselves well. We need to learn how to treat ourselves right. We were not treated as children. We need to learn how to do this for ourselves, And so make sure that you do stick around and you get the help that you need, right? Thanks, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.